Lonely Monk Productions. I don't know if y'all have heard Around the Christmas Tree by G Love yet, but yo,
that's my Jawn! Hey yo, displace the guilt and...
What's good, friends and family, neighbors near and far? Welcome to an all-new episode of the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast. The podcast, website, brand, movement, way of life dedicated to the embrace and championing of your passions. I am your host, Nate Runkle, a.k.a. John Cougar Mellencamp, a.k.a. Nate the Great, a.k.a. John Luke Godard, a.k.a. the guy in the horror film who always says to his dog, "What are you barking at? There's nothing out there," shortly before being impaled by the unstoppable killing machine, a.k.a. Nate 3.0, back at it again with another episode of the podcast. As always, I hope this podcast finds you all in good health and in good spirits. How we doing, gang? In a little bit, I'm joined by Keith Marlowe of the band The Miners. Keith has been a force in the Philly music scene dating back to the 80s, and I am so glad that we got to sit down to chat. And that's coming up in a little bit. Well, how was everyone's Thanksgiving? Have we all awakened from our tryptophan-induced comas? Are we turkeyed out? Mine was pretty great, thanks for asking. Though, you know, there was one moment that has been living in my head that I just can't shake. So let me paint you a picture. Imagine me, surrounded by loved ones, snuggled up early in the day to catch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It's a staple. The balloons, the floats, the badly lip-sync performances of pop stars, old and new. I love it all. It is Thanksgiving to me. It's a happy place. But then, it happened. We're all chatting during a commercial break, and I caught it just out of the corner of my line of sight, right there on the TV. My eyes went wide, and I couldn't find the specific words that I wanted to use in mixed company. And I made eye contact with my girlfriend's dad, and he goes, "Holy crap, did you see that?" And I did. I did see that. I saw the ad for Jimmy Fallon's new NBC show, That's My Jam. Yeah, that's my jam? Come on, talk about a Thanksgiving kick in the nards. Well, okay, sure, That's My Jam will probably never be confused with Yo, That's My Jawn, but man, that's a bummer. I will say this, though. Our logo, it kicks the crap out of theirs. But yeah, Thanksgiving is now behind us, and we have been immediately jettisoned directly into the 'tis the season time of the year. Well, we took a break at this time last year, but I'm feeling festive, and I think we'll continue to have episodes throughout the holidays. Specifically, we will be doing another In the Basement with Nate live stream ukulele sing-along. And we'll release that here as a podcast as well, along with some selections from last year's stream. So keep an eye out for a date and time on the Yo, That's My Jawn Facebook page. My guest today got his start in the Philly music scene as the guitar player and founding member of the band Tornado 5, sharing the stage with greats like former guest John Faye and his band The Beat Clinic and indie legends Yola Tango. In 2007, he started the alt-country outfit The Miners, armed with country-infused guitar and pedal steel originals and influenced by acts like Uncle Tupelo, Graham Parsons, and Merle Haggard. The Miners have just released their long-awaited first full-length album, Megunticook, featuring 10 songs brilliantly written by my guest. Folks, it is my honor to welcome to the show, Keith Marlowe. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by the great Keith Marlowe of the Miners. Keith, thank you for joining us today on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, I've kind of was just telling you before we started this, I've kind of been mainlining your album, your recent release, Megunticook. Close? Am I close?
Yeah,
that was better.
That was better. That was good. Yep.
It's really, really amazing. I'm an alt country guy, so it's really like right up my alley, almost made for me. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but just to get started, kind of tell these fine folks a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I'm a Philly area guy. Grew up mostly in Elkins Park, which is suburb of Philly, like just north of really the city line, like Cheltenham Avenue.
Okay.
And so been here really my whole life. I actually went to Temple for college, although I started at Pitt for a year and then transferred, but ended up graduating Temple. And before that, obviously graduated high school. I went to Cheltenham High School, and then played in bands beginning, in the Philly music scene, kind of beginning in the late 80s, around sort of 87. And then took some time off, but then now I'm leading this band called The Miners, which is what the album you were talking about, and I think is probably what we'll be talking about a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So when you were a little kid in Elkins Park, what kind of music was like playing around the house? What were your parents listening to and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I was I was born in the late 60s, so I was really a product of the 70s. And for me, a lot of that, well, there was a lot of music in my house because my father is a concert pianist. So,
fantastic.
So, there was always music in my house, classical, but also my father was a big Beatles fan. In fact, he was somewhat famous, especially when he was younger. He had an identical twin brother known as the Marlowe twins, and when they were in their, early teens, they were performing on like the Milton Berle show and the Tonight Show and things like that. So there's always music, and they actually did one of their albums was like classical versions of Beatles songs. So that's where sort of the Beatles piece comes in. But I always say I really like my exposure to music was like my mom would drive me to school because I went to a private school, Germantown Friends, and she worked there, and we would listen to AM radio driving to school. And AM radio in the 70s was very different. I mean, today everything's segmented, right? Like, whatever you listen to, whether it's Spotify or Sirius XM, there's a specific channel for a specific type of music.
Right.
Or there's, these playlists for this type of music. It was just like free for all. You listen to Kiss would come on with Beth and then ABBA, and then you would hear like Glenn Campbell, and then there'd be, Donna Summer. It was just like everything. So you really got exposed. Like, I feel like I got exposed kind of to all different types of music. It wasn't just like, I'm sitting and listening to country music all the time, or I'm listening to rock. I obviously eventually got my own tastes that evolved, but my early exposure was really kind of to a lot of different things. And then, there was definitely a heavy Beatles influence.
Yeah. It's really funny. And I don't know if it's like there's a certain window of age, but I feel like, there's a good core of a lot of us who, because of that early exposure to so much, have such a well-rounded kind of appreciation for music that, like you said, doesn't necessarily exist anymore. It is so segmented and stuff like that. I do kind of miss those days and wax nostalgic about them because like, I'm the same way. My dad listened to reggae and Motown and rock and soul, and just, it was just, I didn't really understand genre growing up at all. It was almost like a forced construct, if you will. But
yeah. And even, I was watching MTV on day one, but, that was like a whole nother thing, right? Like, opened up. Obviously early the types of music that they had was less limited, but not for me, because it was exposing me to a lot of music and bands and that I've never even heard of. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, and that kind of moved me more into sort of like, the new wave and alternative. I use the term alternative, and I don't know if we used to call it like college radio rock,
right.
Or something, or back then. So, and then like I kind of, when I use alternative, I sort of think of more of sort of the modern alternative. I guess it was more like indie rock, you would call it today. But, it was sort of that post-punk new wave. But then you also, MTV was showing like metal bands, right? Like Iron Maiden and, I didn't really know any of that. And, I liked it enough to listen to it. I mean,
right.
I became a metalhead, but,
So your dad's playing piano. Are you picking up an instrument early on? Is that kind of imparted on you, or is that something?
I wanted to play an instrument, and my father said, you have to take 2 years of piano, and then you can choose whatever instrument you want other than drums, because he didn't want to have drums in the house.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to play guitar, so I took lessons with my father for 2 years, and then I picked up a guitar. I think somebody gave us a guitar, and then started taking some lessons, and then really kind of, getting books and doing a lot of learning on my own. I mean, there was no YouTube back then, so it was books. There wasn't even really much video instruction that early on. A lot of it was you listen to records and you figure things out by listening and playing, and that's how you learn. And then there was sheet music. That was the other piece.
Yeah. Did it come naturally to you? Did you have to work hard for it?
Yeah, the ear thing did come pretty naturally. I mean, one of the things, and one of the ways I sort of got myself into my very first band in high school was they were looking for a replacement, and they brought me in, and I could play the songs well enough, and they had another guy that was kind of the band leader that was sort of dictating the songs that we were going to play. And then I came in and I said, why don't we play this song? I figured it out. And they're like, oh, you can figure out songs too. I'm like, yeah, well, I listen to them, and I figure out, the chords, and and the lead parts and things like that. And that ultimately kind of got the other guy out, because they didn't really like the material he was bringing, and they were like, oh, let's do this. I mean, we were listening to a lot of different stuff. It's a lot of Police, Rush. I mean, those were definitely the heaviest influences. But then we'd mix in, Clash and, whatever was on the radio, or really like a lot of the MTV stuff. It was pretty broad, like what we would cover. But definitely that piece of it, like the ear, part of it did come naturally.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, those kind of first high school bands or whatnot, what type of show were you like playing shows, or was this like a jam in a basement kind of thing?
It started out jam in a basement, and then like somebody would have a party that we'd play, or we would, decide that somebody would have a party so that we could play at it. Or then, the high school we did a high school dance. They had like a battle of the bands. It was that kind of thing. We were never playing in clubs or venues at that point, and it was all covers, pretty much, and up until sort of like the very end of high school.
Yeah.
But we were, again, sort of running through the list of stuff. We do like Rainbow songs and. Some metal stuff. Like I love Richie Blackmore and people like that, so it was a real mix. I wasn't so much into, I didn't kind of get more into that real alternative stuff until probably I went to college. And then I really kind of started to shift away and kind of hone in on, back then, which was more of, like the, again, college radio, a lot of the jangly guitar stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, the good stuff, as I like to call it. That's also where my wheelhouse is. What was kind of the Pied Piper to that? What was it that drew you when you started?
Well, again, MTV was some exposure, but the real thing for me was when I went my first year of school, college, I went to Pitt, and I worked in this place that was called the Language Lab, and it was like basically back then you had to when you learned a language, there was these like recorded tapes. So if you were in the class, you brought a blank cassette to the Language Lab, and we had all these like things on reel-to-reel tapes, and we would make dupes for you. So that was like my job. But the guy that ran it actually was like a drummer in a punk band, and listened to like was constantly listening to what I don't even know what the station was, but really it was like the college radio station then. So, all of a sudden I'm hearing some of the stuff, that I'd heard on MTV, Tainted Love and stuff like that. But then I'm hearing bands like the Hoodoo Gurus, a lot of REM, and so my bandmates at home, the ones from college or from high school, I'm sorry, we still kind of had our band going, and we were starting to write original songs. And I think I remember coming home from winter break and I'm saying, this is what we're doing. Like, you guys got to listen to this stuff.
Yeah.
And we're going to start to like try and like write songs in this vein. And that really kind of just like was the shift.
Okay. Okay. So that band stayed together through Pitt.
Yeah. Well, I ended up going to Pitt for 1 year because I went out for engineering and realized that wasn't for me. And I had some other stuff going on at home. My girlfriend was at Delaware, who's actually my wife. So that worked out well. And so I ended up coming home and transferring to Temple after my first year, and then graduated from Temple. So,
okay. What did you study at Temple? Still engineering?
Economics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I shifted. I knew after one semester that there was too much math and science involved.
But you kept it in the alphabet. You stayed in the E's, so it makes sense.
That's a good observation. I didn't think of it that way. But.
Yeah, you just turned a page, and there it was. So you guys are starting to write stuff. Can you kind of pinpoint in your mind when it started to click? Like, did you guys have like a sound at a certain point where it was less kind of a potpourri, or?
Yeah, I mean, the earliest songs, we started writing at the end of high school. Me and the bass player who, was with me through, from the first band I was in, through that early 80s band, late 80s band, early 90s band called Tornado 5. He still sometimes subs for the Miners. So, and we started writing some songs, and, definitely the early stuff was like listening to Police and trying to do some of that, more of that kind of stuff. But then once we, started shifting our sound, then we started to try to write more of like, stuff that was, I would definitely say more jangly, more in the vein of the bands that we were listening to that were sort of this, college radio indie rock. And we were a trio. So the bass player sang, but then we ultimately decided that we wanted to add a fourth member, and we wanted a singer. So we added a member, and it ended up being a female, and that sort of was when we really we had some songs on our own, this group, but then she came in, we started writing new songs, and we kind of just shifted the thing, and that's when sort of we really kind of broke into the Philly club scene and started playing.
Okay, yeah. So when she comes in, does that kind of affect your songwriting, or do you kind of continue?
Yeah. Well, it did, because first of all, she was really like, well, she wrote all the lyrics. That was the first thing. I was really kind of the person that wrote the music. Like, I came up with the musical ideas. We would sort of jam on it, come up with ideas. Then she would like take lyrics and start kind of singing over, what we had written. And so the process changed. And then the sound, it evolved. It started sort of as this base of the types of things that we were doing before she got into the band. And then as she got in the band, we really, our sound definitely started to shift. Having a female lead singer, where I'm playing a a black Rickenbacker 360. And, we just got like the first early comparisons, obviously, were like 10,000 Maniacs, right? Like that was the easiest one. But, we definitely started to move harder. We loved the early Pretenders, especially those first 2 albums and that EP, with the original lineup. And then we actually really kind of started to shift more like and get a little, I'd say, weirder and get more into like a Throwing Muses kind of sound and that kind of thing. So,
was it, were you approaching it still as I guess let me kind of reframe this. Did you ever approach it as a hobby, or was it always something that you knew that you wanted to kind of focus on? Was it always kind of the love?
Well, back then we were trying to, make it, like, we were trying to get signed. We were trying to, if we could tour. We never really went on, we did play New York. We played CBGBs. We played places like that, Kenny's Castaways. So it was all sort of like, within a couple hours of Philly. We had a couple opportunities where we could have gone to some places, but we just could never get it together. And then we never, really got like a release that was going to, we never put anything out at that time on record.
Yeah.
Before we were ready to, and then we broke up. So.
Oh no. So this is still all pre Tornado 5?
No, this is all.
This is the Tornado 5. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay,
this
okay.
is Tornado 5. Yeah, it started. The band was originally called the Unmentionables, which was what we were as a 3-piece, and then when we added the singer, we stayed with that name, and then there was like another band in like Central or North Jersey that was the Unmentionables, and like we were playing some of the same venues. So,
Gotcha.
So they contacted us, and we were like we're not that wed to the name, and we ended up coming up with this name Tornado 5, which, I'm happy to tell you the story if you want.
Yes, I would love to, because I'm quite perplexed how 4 members become a 5.
Yeah. Well, that was always one of, so people say, why are you Tornado 5? There's only 4 of you. So at the time we were trying to come up with names, and our singer was an artist. She went to, what was it called back? University of the Arts, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's still called that.
I think it is.
And so we were like, I remember we were sitting around trying to come up with a name, and we probably had ordered out and gotten cheesesteaks or something. And you get these paper bags, right? Like that the cheesesteaks come in. And there was this bag, it was a white bag, and there's always a name on it, and then there's a number which represents sort of like the weight of the bag. So the bag was Tornado, and then it said 5 at the triangle around it, which looked exactly like Document from REM.
REM, yeah, sure.
So, and we were like, Tornado 5. There's the name.
And I like it.
We got the name.
That's awesome. And
then she left. She left, and we continued as a 3-piece, and we changed the name to Tornado 6, just to confuse people even more. So.
That's the best. That's the best. All I was going to say was I gotta appreciate that it came from a cheesesteak bag too, because it keeps it very on brand of the area. So at that time, you said you were kind of playing around and stuff like that. Prior to hitting record here, we were talking about you had played some shows with John Faye.
Right.
What other kind of bands were kind of around the scene at that time? Yeah,
so it was a good scene back then, but there was a lot less opportunities to play, like as far as venues. But the scene was very tight. There's a lot of camaraderie. Like we played with a lot of the same bands. Flight of Mavis, which became Buzz Emer, the Wishniaks, I don't know if you know them, Napalm Sunday, Electric Love Muffin was sort of in the scene with us. There was a host of other bands too. Naked Twister, Red Herring. I don't know if you know any of these names, but
some of them sound familiar. Others sound completely made up on the spot. No,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, they could be. As far as
I'm just kidding.
But there. I mean, it was the scene was there was a segment to the scene in that there was this sort of like alternative, I guess indie group, and then there was sort of like the other group, which was kind of the bands that were managed by the same people that were, managing like the Hooters and Tommy Conwell, like the ones that really broke. I mean, there are obviously a few bands like Dead Milkmen and, Ben Vaughn, like that kind of broke out of the Philly scene, but it just didn't really have, and I've talked about this before. It didn't have sort of like the cachet that like in Athens, Georgia, Boston, Austin, Texas. I mean, obviously North Carolina had bands, DBs and some bands come out of there because you had sort of Mitch Easter studio down there, and then. And I'm not sure exactly why that was, but there were a lot of really good bands with really good music. They just didn't seem to just like, I think there was like a lack of maybe, this is just my view. I think it was like a lack of like a strong indie label that was based in Philly that had really good distribution. Because these other cities, either they had a band that broke out and then everybody kind of came and looked at the other bands, or they had like a strong label. I mean, like a little later, obviously, you ended up with like, well, Minneapolis, right? Like you had Twin Tone. Later you had Seattle and Sub Pop and all that, labels like that. Like there wasn't any of that in Philly. I think that was, to me, was like the biggest reason why more of these bands didn't get, bigger recognition. And when I say bigger, I'm talking about like enough that they could tour nationally and, I mean, I don't know what was successful, probably selling like 5,000 records or something maybe was a big success. I don't know. To me, though, like for us, we ended up playing with a lot of these bands that we really loved because we played, I mean, every month we played J.C. Dobbs and Khyber Pass. And J.C. Dobbs, it was often opening for whoever was touring. So, we would get put on bills. We opened for the Blake Babies, which is Juliana Hatfield's band.
Sure.
Yola Tango. There's a band from Boston called Big Dipper that we loved. The Wild Seeds from Austin, Texas. I mean, these bands were, bands that like we were buying their albums and we loved them. So it was awesome. I mentioned Napalm Sunday. They opened for Nirvana at Dobbs. So it was fun. And, but a lot of these shows, like you would, sometimes these shows, it would be, my friends from Napalm Sunday were the ones in the audience, and that was it. Or, but all the bands seemed to support each other. I mean, we were in college, so, we would go out on a Tuesday night and Thursday night or whatever.
Yeah. It's just kind of speaking to that scene and even kind of the resurgence it had a few years ago. I miss JC Dobbs so much. Like it was just such a perfect room to be, packed in and sweaty and watch good live music. I
spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, I bet. So you guys kind of go your separate ways. What musically, where do you head next after that?
So musically for me, I really kind of, so after our singer left, we continued as a 3-piece, which was basically back to our high school, but we were definitely more like getting into like the Dinosaur Jr. kind of sound.
Okay. Yeah.
So we continued for about 2 years. And then I actually went off to law school. And I ended up going to Dickinson, which is in Carlisle. And one of the reasons I decided I didn't want to stay in Philly was I was afraid I was going to be kind of drawn to keep playing and be distracted. But then, of course, when I'm in law school, I ended up like playing in a cover band in law school and staying with music. And then I really wasn't in the Philly music scene, or really doing anything with music like publicly for about 10 years. But
Okay.
I was always writing and recording during that period. So, I kept at it. And, I started writing songs that I sang. And I've always been, recording, whether it's 4-track cassette or then, 8-track reel to reel, kind of had a home studio. And so sometimes I'd get people to come over and, lay down tracks, or sometimes I'd do it all on my own with the drum machine or whatever it was. But, I'd started to record, batches of songs on my own.
Yeah.
So during that time, that sort of gap. Yeah.
So whatever, did you ever do any of those? Did any of those songs kind of make any transition into anything when you got back into it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess now I can get to the beginning of the Minors. So the Minors was formed by accident. I say, I mean, I wasn't looking to get into a band, but, a friend of mine who played in another band back in the scene we were talking about, his name is Matt Maguire, and he was in a band called the Bensons. He had played maybe one or two acoustic shows, where he was singing some of his own songs, and he asked me to join him and play the next one. Hey, can you play guitar? And we had done some things in the past together, and we actually had written a song. I had written a song that he came in and helped on, and ended up writing the lyrics and vocal line. And so he's like, we can do some of these songs that we did together, and I had started to write some songs. He's like, I know you have a couple songs, we could do some of those. And so we started rehearsing as a duo, and then somehow we got a gig, but it was going to be more of a full band situation. So he's like, hey, we, forget the acoustic thing. I got us this gig. We're going to put a band together. I already got a bass player and a drummer. Something didn't happen. The drummer didn't work out. So I ended up bringing in my old drummer from high school and Tornado 5. And that's how, so this is all going to, everything revolves around John Faye, right? So, so we had this gig. It was at some bar up in Skipback, and we had all these people that were going to come because we hadn't played in years, and the place closed down 2 weeks before.
No way.
We were supposed to play our first gig. So I was like, all right, well, we have a band. We have a set, and we have a good number of people that were going to come out to see us. I'm like, I don't know, we got to, they're like, well, we should get a gig. I'm like, I don't know. I've been out of this music scene here for 15 years. I don't know how to get a gig. I was like, but I do know one person who's still in the scene, John Faye. So John and I reconnected because he actually lived only a few blocks from me, and our kids actually went to preschool together.
Oh, small world.
So I called John up and I said, hey, John, actually 3 of the 4 people in this band. So we're not going to be an embarrassment. And all I can tell you is that we're going to bring out, I don't know how many people, but a lot of people who have a lot of disposable income and will drink a lot. Can you get us a gig? And he's like, well, we're playing at what was the Grape Street, I guess it was called.
Yep.
Not the original where it is now, back now.
Oh, when it was on.
Whatever, the one that got flooded.
Yep.
Yeah. He's like, we're playing on this bill. There's 3 bands, but I can see if maybe they can put you on at the front. And I said, well, that's great. 7:00 on a Friday night, we can get people to come for happy hour.
Yeah.
And so that was our first gig. I think we brought in over 90 people or something. It was really, and that's how the band started.
That's unbelievable.
But I wasn't the original lead singer at that time. It was Matt. And I was singing a couple songs that I had written, and a couple of these songs were songs that were written during that 10-year period. I really was into the alt-country thing, and I started writing songs in that vein. And I was like, hey, here's a couple that I've written I think will work. He was more into kind of, I would say, Brit power pop stuff, Nick Lowe kind of stuff. So his songs tended to lean more towards that. Mine probably leaned a little more on the countryside. But he was singing, I was singing, 2 or 3 songs, and he was singing all the rest. So.
Where did the for you prior to this, where did the entry point into alt country come for you? Was it the same as the rest of us, Uncle Tupelo, or?
Yeah, a little before that, because I'll go back to, again, kind of like the early MTV stuff and that kind of college rock in the like mid to late 80s. I mean, there were bands like, do you know Long Riders, for instance?
Sounds familiar, but
so like they were really doing like alt country, and then you had like Jason and the Scorchers and bands like that were, I mean, I know everybody pegs on Uncle Tupelo, but if you kind of go back, and there was a lot of bands that had like country, like, tinges to them.
Sure.
Farmers.
Even some of that REM has,
Well, I mean, we actually cover, Rockville, Don't Go Back to Rockville.
Yeah.
Pedal Steel in it. I mean, and I always say, I was like, this is a country song.
Yeah.
And back, REM to me they were a huge influence on me. But they really influenced me also to get deeper into country, because I would listen to interviews, and Michael Stipe would say, or they'd ask Michael Stipe, who's your biggest influence? He'd say, Buck Owens. I'm like, oh, Buck Owens. I'm going to go buy Buck Owens records, like dig through the bins. And so then I started listening to that. Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, like, I get the question, and we go back to your AM radio discussion, but, when did you start listening to country? I always I knew you in high school, you were listening to Rush and the Police. And I'm like, well, I grew up on AM radio, and Glenn Campbell, would come on the radio, and I listened to him or whoever, Willie Nelson, so I had exposure. I just wasn't deep into it. And then I always just appreciated, even in Tornado 5, like some of these bands that had country flavorings, and we'd have a couple things like I can pull up songs and I'm like, hear like little country licks I'm throwing in, or we had one song that was almost like a cowpunk type of song. So there was definitely, it was around. And then obviously when, Uncle Tupelo and then, and those bands kind of came, that really, I was like, oh, I love this. I've been kind of listening to this, for the last 5 years, but now there's like a whole scene dedicated to it, and a bunch of records coming out. And then that, I think as I was writing on my own, I was definitely kind of, getting more into listening to country. Even like I was deeper listening in, old time country, because I think at that time I started to get a little, like, I wasn't that enamored with like the sort of what was popular music, even in sort of the alternative space outside of the, there are a few things, like I love Pavement and things like that. But, so I kind of was like, started to go deep and, dig into kind of old country records and really listening to that. So it was just like kind of all that stuff kind of came and kind of pushed me into that. And then, I'm writing music, and I always say, I'm like, I don't care what anybody says, you're influenced by what you listen to, and then Definitely. It's how you make it your own. But, some people wear their influences, on their sleeves, like real blatantly, and some people disguise them, but, nobody's doing anything really original, right? Like
Definitely.
Everybody's copying everybody else.
Yeah.
To some.
Right. It's my favorite quote from I'm not sure if you're familiar with the movie Almost Famous, but when Lester Bangs asked the question, if Bowie's doing Lou and Lou's doing Bowie, isn't Lou just doing Lou? It always cracked me up. I always love that. I always stuck by that. So you guys play that awesome Grape Room show, and you've got your following that has kind of followed both. I'm sure everybody from the scene kind of coming back. What happens that you end up taking over the vocals?
Yeah. So the band was this was about 2 years into the band. We'd been playing some shows. I mean, we played like Tin Angel, and I think we played a couple shows back at the Grape Room again, and a couple other shows. And then Matt, the lead singer, decided he didn't really want to play shows. Like, he didn't want to, lug equipment around and do all the stuff. And so I said, well, I'm kind of having fun doing this again. And Andy Shahan, who was my drummer from way back, who was still in the band, he was still into it. And so I said, look, I'm going to try and, I'm already singing a few songs. I'm going to try and, write more songs and take over fronting the band. And this was the first band I've ever fronted. I never fronted a band before. I was always a guitarist, maybe sang a little here and there, but never fronted a band. But I said, I definitely want to take it more in like the alt country space, into that sound. So I said, we need to find another guitar player, but I'd really love to find a pedal steel guitar player. And there was a guy who I knew who played guitar in another band, but he was learning pedal steel. And I asked him if he was interested in playing with us, and he said, yeah, he's like, I'll play guitar with you. And I said, well, I'd love you if you would play pedal steel. And he's like, well, I'm just learning. I'm not that good, but so we had a few rehearsals with him playing guitar, and then he calls me up. He's like, I like the stuff, but I kind of think I want to use this as an outlet to play pedal steel guitar. And I'm like, great. That's what I wanted to do.
That's what I wanted. Place. Yeah.
so we had pedal steel, and then we had like more bass players than Spinal Tap drummers. The original bass player ended up leaving and replaced with somebody else. But then we started going out as this band with me fronting it, writing all the songs, and and with the lineup, the instrumentation that still exists today.
Yeah. When
not those members.
Sure. When you so when you start writing, you take over, does your writing change, or not to springboard ahead too far, but this album has a lot of very personal kind of songs on it. Were you kind of writing that stuff when you were writing for other people, or did that come out from?
Well, as far as writing music with lyrics, I've never written for anybody else.
Oh, okay.
I've only written for myself. So the lyrics, so there's actually one song on Megunticook that was written in 2008. That was kind of, I guess that was in the first year of the Miners formation, before I was fronting the band. And I think we actually did that song, performed it once with the old singer, but I probably sang it live. And so, I always have written songs for me, but I wasn't necessarily lead singer. Like I could record my vocals, but I never was like really writing to think that I'd be performing these songs live necessarily.
Yeah.
So that changed. And then, once I really was like, all right, well, I gotta, I'm writing songs and I'm writing lyrics now, what am I going to write about? It's always easy for me to write about things, save for a few there's a couple songs where they're not sort of personal experiences or something that I've come up, that's happened to me, but I just sort of write. I guess I find that's the easiest thing.
Yeah, yeah. There's a bit of distance between the first EP that you guys did, and then Megunticook. I'm right there.
Yeah, yeah.
It's coming. It's coming. What was that duration like? What were you guys playing? You guys were still playing during that time, right?
No, we were playing we were playing live. I mean, we play about 6 shows a year.
Okay.
So we don't play, that much. Some of the reason is everybody's working that's in the band. And I just find that, if we played 3 times a month, we couldn't get anybody to come. I mean,
right.
And we're a little bit picky. Like we try not to play weeknights because we know we can't get people out. I mean, we're all, the band members are from like the late 30s to, like early 60s. So it's like, everybody's kind of, either has kids or, is sort of even kids in college and that kind, from young kids to, so it's really hard to get people to come out on a Tuesday night unless like we're opening for a touring act or something downstairs at World Cafe. Like that's
right.
Or if somebody said, hey, we were playing these country nights that at one point were going on at Bob and Barbara's on like, I think it was a Wednesday night, you don't have to bring anybody. There's like, people are just going to come.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. Like, somebody asked us to play a gig. It's like, look, we'll play, Wednesday night, wherever, but I'm just going to let you know, I can't guarantee you we could bring one person out. So
right.
If you want us to still play that gig, we'll do it. But, I want to be honest with, the promoters and the club owners about what, we could deliver, versus.
Sure.
So that's what, but during that time we were playing, live. There was a lot of lineup changes in the band. We did put out one single, which was a cover. We started doing demos for Megunticook, like songs that would end up on Megunticook. And out of the first sessions, we did a cover of a song called Miller's Cave, which is it's really a country classic. It's been covered by a lot of people. The version we sort of based it on because we were doing it live was the International Submarine Band, which is Graham Parsons' first band. On their album, they do a cover of Miller's Cave. So this is sort of a loose cover of a cover of a cover, I guess. So that was sort of during that gap. We were playing live, done a little recording, but a lot of it was just me trying to get like the lineup solidified and get people into the studio. I mean, that's part of the delay. I mean, I do constantly, my ongoing joke is that, Megunticook has taken longer than Boston's third album to complete. And, the album itself from start to finish, from demos till we actually released it probably took, 3+ years. But again, a lot of I started thinking about doing the follow-up probably in 2015 or 2016.
Okay. So I guess when did you record this? Because there was, I don't know if you know this or not, but there was this global pandemic that occurred.
Yeah, there was. I heard about that.
Yeah.
So we started recording it pre-pandemic.
Okay.
The pandemic definitely had an impact on the process and on the, ultimately the release date. But we fortunately so the album was recorded in 2 places, really. It was all the basic tracks other than 2 songs, and all the mixing was done at Milk Boy, the studio.
Yeah.
And then all the overdubs and the last two tracks, basic tracks, were done in my home studio in the
awesome.
basement that you're seeing me in, actually. So we fortunately had all the basic tracks completed for the songs that were done at Milk Boy. We were mixing basically. I had all the overdubs completed for, I think it was 4 or 5 songs, like the first batch of songs.
Okay.
So we were in the process of mixing those songs, and then I was starting to do overdubs on the second half And then there was sort of 2 songs that ended up getting kind of recorded at the end. And then when the pandemic hit, like it sort of stopped the mixing because I was going into the studio to mix, and then the studio shut down. And so basically there was like a good gap, I would say, of 6 months that we couldn't mix the record. And then I was like, a lot of the overdubs are me because it's vocals. I do all the guitar work. So, but I needed my pedal steel player to come in, or I needed somebody to come in and do background vocals, or my drummer to come in and do percussion. And, obviously there's a hesitancy to kind of do that.
Sure.
Until probably like, I think in the summer of whatever it was, 2020, who knows what time.
Yeah, exactly.
That I think we got comfortable. I'm like, all right, come in, we can wear masks or whatever, because we played a show, an outdoor show, like for a community concert series in the summer of 2020 that wasn't canceled. It was in a huge space where people could spread out. And so we started rehearsing for that, wearing masks in my basement. I mean, I was comfortable that, my band members were, they were acting smartly.
Yeah, sure.
And they're not,
yes.
sort of like anti-vaxxers or anything like that. I mean, obviously this was pre-vaccines, but being careful with masking and stuff like that. So we were all comfortable enough to get together. And then at that point I was like, well, my pedal steel player can come over and, record pedal steel parts and, slide guitar and all the other stuff that he put on. So then it sort of picked back up, and then Milk Boy fortunately started opening, it opened back up so we could kind of start the mixing process again. And then, so, sort of late, call it 2020, it got going back.
Okay.
Again, and then.
Yeah. So you guys released this album the end of October. What is the reaction to it been?
I mean, it's, the people who've heard it really like it.
Me.
Obviously,
yeah, I'm right there with it.
Obviously, trying to get people to listen to it is the challenge. I mean, our first EP, Miners Rebellion. We did get, we got reviews, we got write-ups in No Depression, we got airplay on a lot of these sort of like internet radio stations that were focused on Americana music. We got I mean, we definitely got like a lot of UK interest.
Really?
There seems to be kind of a big interest in Americana music and US Americana music over there. So, we got some radio shows and write-ups and blogs and things like that that were based in the UK. So we had a little bit of, a base, but I'm not going to tell you like, we sold thousands and thousands of CDs. We didn't. I still have plenty of boxes that, I'm happy to send you one if you want. And so, but, I can see just like even like our Spotify plays, like for us, they're way up compared to where we were, and just that type of thing. So, I think people are listening to it. We've started to, we got played on Dan Reed's Americana Music Hour a couple weeks ago. So, those are the types of things that we're really trying to, we've had some press, some good press. So, we're sort of trying to continue to get it out there, get the word out. I mean, the other big thing for us is I decided to put this out on vinyl.
Oh, very nice.
Which is a whole nother issue with the pandemic.
Sure.
And the vinyl, of course, we had our record release show on the October 29th with no records because they hadn't come in yet. Oh, no. But they have actually been pressed in Canada, and they've been shipped, although I have not gotten them yet. And
oh no!
I checked it looks like they're stuck somewhere in Canada at this point. So I'm hoping to get them in the next week or so.
Yeah,
we actually have pre-orders for them on Bandcamp, and so I'm a big vinyl consumer myself. So
same. You guys regularly you're about to do the sixth benefit at the World Cafe
Yes.
Live, right?
Right.
For breast cancer, which obviously plays into your wife surviving breast cancer, right? We're still good there, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank God.
Thanks
Thank
for
God.
asking. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Without You is a beautiful song and a beautiful sentiment. With as much as you want to share, tell me a little bit about kind of that process of kind of putting that to music. Like that's
Yeah. So as you said, I do write songs, that are personal. And I've known my wife since fourth grade.
Oh my God, that's beautiful.
We went to high school together. We didn't date in high school, but we started dating right after high school and then got married. So I've known her, forever. And when she was diagnosed and she told me, obviously it was, all I could think about was like, I don't want to lose you.
Yeah.
Fortunately, was caught early and she's fine. But one of the ways I deal with certain situations, and I have other songs, that are like this, where there's a, something, maybe it's upsetting or there's a loss or something, is I end up writing a song about it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just my own way of dealing with these issues or healing or whatever you want to call it. So, I just kind of started writing a song about it, and, it kind of just came together. It wasn't like I'm going to write a song about,
right.
It's just like, I was writing songs and I'm like, starting to think about it. And then like the lyrics kind of just started to flow. And I'm generally in music, like I said, I didn't always front a band and write songs. I wrote music though for Tornado 5. And so I'm a music first writer. Come up with a musical idea and then start to think about, the vocal line, and then usually the lyrics are the last thing. I think this one kind of all just sort of, I started thinking about the lyrics, and then I'm playing my acoustic, and it's like, this guy, and it just kind of all flowed together.
Yeah. Like I said, it's an absolutely beautiful song. And,
Thank you.
I think it's made more beautiful by the fact that there is a happy ending to the story,
Yeah.
It's tough. And, I mean, I'm very glad that worked out. Not just for a beautiful song, but also, for someone you knew your whole life. That's
Thanks. I mean, the one thing about that song, and when I started writing, sort of song descriptions, just for whoever, like reviewers or radio, like, the first thing I wrote is, this is not a COVID song, because like it's coming out, without you, right? And then the other thing I noticed, and I think this was maybe in another interview, is that there's only one line in the whole song that you actually know what it's about, or that you don't even know that it's about breast cancer, because there's nothing in there.
Right.
But there's one line that says, when I heard that you got sick. Everything else just talks about just not being. It could be about like a divorce, for all anybody knows. So I guess I don't know if that's clever or I don't know, but I kind of like, that's actually kind of cool. Not intentional, but
it makes it very relatable, because it's not about actual. So it's not about the illness or about that. It's literally about the love and the fear of losing that person to whatever. It doesn't matter what takes that person away, like just the absence of your friend since fourth grade. That's that's I absolutely love that song.
Thank you.
There's like I kind of touched upon earlier, there's a lot of like heavy stuff on here, Natalie dealing with your grandmother's dementia, and the day the drummer died. I mean, like this is just a lot of really heavy stuff, and not to blow smoke or anything, but I believe you handle it well, and you kind of capture those emotions very well. Do you have any issues? I don't know if issue is the right word, but when you're playing them live, kind of what's that like? Like, are you able to kind of disconnect from the emotions behind them to perform them, or?
Yeah. I mean, I don't say I get emotional. I mean, definitely, like, Without You is a song that, I mean, my wife loves that song, and so, and when we play it at like the breast cancer benefit, it even has more like meaning to it. So there's a little of that. Sometimes playing, I play Natalie, and then, if my sister or my, somebody, or, that knew my grandmother, is in the audience, I'll obviously give them, sort of acknowledge them in the song, but, it doesn't like, I don't think it comes out like for me, once I'm sort of singing the song, I'm just trying to perform it as best as I can. Yeah. Try and sing on key is really is my whole goal. So
yeah. What so what's next? I mean, you have the album. Obviously, you're still awaiting the vinyl. But
right.
What are you? Do you have any like holiday shows other than the benefit?
No, we don't. We don't have anything till our benefit on January 8th, and then we've already started to book some shows into next year.
Or we're not going to have to wait another decade in between releases, are we? Or
that I don't know. I mean, so the other thing about Megunticook is, and I talked about the one song that went back to 2008. Megunticook is everything, every original that we hadn't recorded yet.
Okay.
So and I kind of gave myself this ultimatum, which is, until we finish this album, I'm not writing another song, because I don't want to be in the middle of this album and then I write a song and I'm like, maybe we should put this on the album. Maybe we should add this. Like, I wanted to get this out of the way. So I feel like the slate's clean. And then, I have been starting to think about writing songs again. So, and I don't like, I don't sit down and be like, oh, I'm going to write a song. I just, I start to noodle and come up with ideas, and then I kind of get into something, and then I'm like, all right, let me, I record demos myself typically. So, because the band doesn't play that much and we don't rehearse a ton, it's hard to kind of just like bring in ideas and work them up. It's easier for me to say, all right, here's the idea for the song. I record it, maybe like put programmed drums on it and record bass and everything, and be like, here's the song. Yeah. Now we'll take this. We're going to do a cover of this song. You're going to kind of write your, come up with your own parts around, but this is the idea. But the songs do evolve. You talk about Without You. I went back and listened to the demo of that, and like, it's all electric. Without You as recorded, it sort of builds up. It was just like start to finish. There's a lot of like country licks in the demo that I did. So the song changed, in how it sounds. I mean, it was in a different key, because I realized that when I recorded it, like when I was going to sing it live, it was going to be too low.
Oh yeah,
so that kind of thing. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, at this time, would you like to partake in the Jawntlet? These are
sure. I heard about this. So
excellent. All right. So the first part of the Jawntlet is the one-hit wonders. This is our versus category. One-hit wonder number one: Billy Joel or Elton John?
Elton John.
Very nice.
That's an easy one for me. And there's pedal steel in a lot of Elton John songs, which people don't realize.
Yeah, sure, certainly. Number two: Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
Debbie Harry.
Yeah,
big Blondie fan. Yeah. I like Joan Jett, but I was a big, very into Parallel Lines and you know,
Yeah, we just saw them at the Exponential Music Festival. Was that 2 years ago, I guess? And they
oh,
still
really?
got it, man. They still
Yeah. I saw them at the Keswick. I mean, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, but yeah, they'll still sounded really good.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, write great songs. So.
Yeah. Number 3, Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
Aretha.
Yeah.
She's probably one of my favorite female singers. So.
Yeah. What a powerhouse. I mean, like, just unbelievable. Next one, Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
Definitely Nirvana.
Yeah.
You know, I just think obviously what the impact that they had, you know, on music. I mean, I like Pearl Jam, but I'm not a huge Pearl Jam fan. I mean,
okay.
I did see them live. I never saw Nirvana live, but
so you weren't at that Dobbs show? Come on.
I was not at that Dobbs show. That was one of the few, and I probably was like, who are you opening for?
Next one, Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Stevie Nicks.
I kind of guessed that. You know,
I love Fleetwood Mac and Stevie Nicks. I mean, I talk about Aretha. She's also probably one of my top favorite female singers. I just like her voice and how it works, and you know.
Yeah, she has perfected that instrument. You know, that is a fantastic voice. The big one, Beatles or Stones?
Well, I talked about the Beatles' influence.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I like the Stones a lot. But you know, and I don't know if you're watching Get Back like everybody else.
I haven't watched it yet. I want to be able to dedicate an entire day to be able to watch the whole thing in one sitting.
You need an entire day. But yeah, they're, you know, just what they did to music, and you know, the output that they had in such a short amount of time, and how their whole sound evolved.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it's just amazing. Like nobody could ever, you know, and also, you know, I mean, every band has their duds, I guess, but everybody, you know, says, oh, you know, the Stones are the greatest band. I said, yeah, but they also did Emotional Rescue. So.
Which is very true. You know, the thing about the Beatles, and I wanted to, like, if say this thing blows up, all right, and I know this is a pipe dream, but if this were to blow up and I were to be able to interview Paul McCartney, my question would be, all of us as musicians were able to to create music with the inspiration of the Beatles. Being that you are Paul McCartney of the Beatles, like, how heavy does that weigh on you? You know what I mean? Like, right. That's got to be like, oh, something I did. Like, if I thought about the fact that something I did when I was in my 20s influenced music, like not just a band or something like that, but literally changed the landscape of music. I don't know that I would ever be able to rationalize that in my brain, but.
Yeah, no, that is pretty heavy to think about,
right? Like, how do you continue to make music knowing that you broke it and reformed it? You know, like,
right? Well, yeah, I know, and you know that obviously people have their opinions, sort of post Beatles, you know, about things, but yeah, I mean, you know, what they were able to do, you know, that group, and the, you know, obviously particularly the duo of Lennon and McCartney, I mean, really, you know, is amazing. And nobody's, you know, I don't care how many albums somebody sells or whatever, like, it's really irrelevant. I mean, nobody's come kind of close to what they were able to do from, you know, from a musical standpoint, and also just from an influence standpoint.
Absolutely. You know? Absolutely. Last one of the one-hit wonders, Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
That's a tough one, but I'm going to go with Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, I go back to my AM radio 70s days. I remember that one coming on, you know, and another, like, you know, bizarre one, right? Like a 6-minute song or whatever. And, you know, with all these like operatic voices and things like that. So, obviously, like, Stairway to Heaven was like the song I had to learn to play on guitar.
Sure.
So, yeah, I'll go with Bohemian Rhapsody.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. So that's the one hit wonders. Now the top 10 countdown. When I use Jawn here, it can be music. It can be anything you want it to be. It doesn't have to be music. So, you're from the area, Jawn can be whatever you want it to be.
Right. Yep.
So, number one, what was your first Jawn? What was the first thing you were obsessed with when you were younger?
Well, I'll say with the Beatles. They definitely had the biggest influence. Like I remember the first album I got was a Beatles album. I think it was like the greatest hits, the blue. There was like a blue and a red one.
The blue and the red, yeah.
One. Yeah. And the other thing I remember being, and this was probably in like third grade or something, there was in school, there was a classmate of mine who was a huge Beatles fan, and we would do these little performances where we like took tennis rackets and we pretended to be the Beatles and used the tennis rackets as guitars and things like that. So that was, they just had that big influence on me. So I would definitely say that was kind of like the first, big influence musically for me.
Yeah.
And it's obviously stayed with me. So I think that's important.
Absolutely. Number two, what's your current Jawn? What are you into right now?
So I would say pedal steel guitar. I've been learning to play.
That was going to be my question.
For a few years. So, and it's a pretty intensive instrument, and I really love it. I learned to play because, for a couple reasons. One is at one point we didn't have a pedal steel guitar player, a lap steel player, but he lived in Allentown and he played some pedal steel. So I decided to buy a pedal steel so that when he came to rehearse, like there would be a pedal steel here. And I also said, and by the way, since I bought this thing, I'm going to start to try and learn how to play. And the other reason I wanted to learn how to play is so that I could, when I had a pedal steel player, I could actually communicate with them and understand what they were doing. And instead of saying, I want one of these, hey, why don't you do that? Like, A pedal rolling on the B pedal lick there, picking these strings. So, so like I can kind of have a better rapport with the steel player.
Sure.
And then it's just, I kind of got smitten with it and spent a lot of time. It's, it's a hard instrument. I mean, you're using your knees, your feet, your hands. But, I don't think it's as impossible as people think.
Really?
The hard thing for me is it's very theory driven. Like you have to, and it's a real jam instrument. Like I've always been like a writer and a part writer. I'm not like a guy that's going to sit there and like wail on guitar in a jam. Like I'll end up playing like the same 3 licks and scales over and over again.
Yeah. Like
on the fly. And pedal steel is like one of these things where you got to kind of come up with things. You got to think a step ahead. So you have to have a good, understanding. So it's helped me kind of become a better musician as well. But yeah, I've really been just sort of, when I'm not working with the band, and I'm coming down to my basement to do music, I'm sitting on the pedal steel guitar.
That's awesome. Are you, are you familiar with, and I can already hear people who listen to this show rolling their eyes at me, but are you familiar with the Mike Nesmith solo material, Mike Nesmith from the Monkees? Because I forget his name. I want to say it's like Red Rhodes or something like that. The pedal steel player during the first national band stuff is just cosmically brilliant. And I in the past few years, it's been something that I've gravitated to, but I haven't like taken the deep dive into trying to figure out.
I don't know. No, I mean, I've heard some of that stuff. I don't know exactly who the steel player is. I did, by the way, though, get one pedal steel credit on Megunticook. So,
very nice. Very nice.
I am competent enough that I could record. It was something where it was just in one segment and it was more in the background, and I took a stab at it. And my pedal steel player, I said, hey, here's what I did. If you think it stinks, let me know. He's like, no, it sounds fine. Like,
oh, that's cool.
Just keep it. So
very cool. Number 3, what was your first concert?
first concert was The Who with the Clash opening at JFK Stadium.
What a perfect first concert. That's amazing.
1982, I think it was. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Number 4, what was your last concert?
I saw Hayes Carl. You know him?
Yes.
He played at Ardmore a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Music Hall. Yeah.
Awesome.
So
it's great to
I hadn't seen him live. I've always liked him. It's one of those things. He comes into town and I had a conflict every time, and then end up going. He was great. I was really glad I went.
It's great to be out with live music again. Like I really missed it, and I didn't realize how much I missed it until it was gone. It's so great. Number 5, what was your favorite concert you ever went to?
That's a pretty hard one. I think I'm gonna have to go with 2.
That's fine. Sure.
The first one was Pavement did a reunion tour. I don't know. It must have been like 9 or 10 years ago, and they played at the Man, and somehow I got like second row seats. I've never been really that close to stage in a big. I'm not a big like arena show guy. I'd much rather go, to something that's, a theater like 3,000 seats or lower.
Sure.
But I was being that close, and I really liked that band, and that was a great experience. I think the other one I will say, and this was more of like just one of those like experiences, was saw Drive By Truckers in 2016, right the night after the election.
Oh wow!
And that was a surreal moment. I mean, it was one of those things like almost, myself, probably giving away my political leanings, and a lot of other people, like I wasn't sure if I even wanted to go.
Yeah.
And I decided to go, and then I saw some people, and they were just awesome. I mean, it was like, they felt the same way.
Yep.
And it was just like this, it was almost like a healing kind of thing. And, they were telling some stories about some things like in Alabama that you could kind of relate to, like, and it was just one of those, like, above just like a musical performance.
Yeah.
It was just a surreal kind of, and I've seen, Drive By Trucker since then, and Patterson Hood solo, and they like I always talk about that show when they're in Philly.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's really awesome. Yeah. Not to also betray my own leanings, but I went into a little bit of a mental fog following that election, not to sound like some fragile snowflake or whatever anybody wants to throw barbs or whatever, but I'm like a big podcast listener, obviously. This probably will give that away by having one of my own, but I couldn't listen to anybody talk about anything, and music is literally the only thing that got me through that period. Was and I leaned heavy on the Grateful Dead, and I'm not even like Deadhead or anything like that, but for some reason it just it resonated and was what I needed. So number 6, who have you never seen live that you always wanted to? They can be living or dead.
Well, he wasn't, from what I've heard, he wasn't great live, but I would have loved to see Graham Parsons.
Oh my God. Yeah. We, an earlier episode, I talked to somebody about this, but like, finding Graham Parsons was like, finding the key, to an attic full of everything that I always wanted to play with.
Right.
It was like, he was just so perfect. I'm actually going to, I don't know if you heard this. I mentioned this in 2 other episodes, and only special people get to have this conversation. Have you heard the conspiracy theory that Graham Parsons wrote Wild Horses and just gave it to Mick and Keith?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a conspiracy, but I mean, there's definitely like a lot of people that believe that. I mean, I actually believe that. I think
I do too.
Because if you list, obviously Flying Burrito Brothers recorded it first,
right?
If you listen to that song, I mean, obviously he's hanging out with the Stones during that whole period, and influencing just like he did with the Byrds, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like their sound to move into like country. I mean, and you can see, like, obviously the Stones have all the cachet, and they'll be like, he and maybe Keith wrote the song together, and and they didn't give him any credit for
right,
it.
right.
See them being like, well, we're going to record the song, but you can go and record it first, but we'll
take the publishing,
songwriting. Yeah,
yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy, and just a beautiful song too. I mean, like like just that's another one that's just got the really good feels in it. The really good feels. Number 7. Name an unappreciated, John. Name something you wish had more exposure to it.
Well, if I would go with an artist, I could just stay with Graham Parsons.
Stay with Graham Parsons. I like it.
I mean, again, we talked about the Beatles, but like, and it sounds like obviously you're a fan as well. I don't know if you've read any of the, biographies on him, or
I have not.
Oh, you should. There's like 2 or 3 really good ones.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's overlap, but like Ben Fong Torres wrote
that was the one. It's been sitting in my wish list in my Amazon.
Yeah. But there's another guy, like if you look at like his span of when he was like in music and all the things that he touched during that period, like it's amazing. Like, he's, somehow he gets himself and he's in the Byrds, and
right.
then like, he's like in the bank and he's like bumping into Crosby, in line and then he's like, and a lot, and then he's, discovered, I mean, he didn't discover, but he broke Emmylou Harris, and then like, and then his influence keeps going. I mean, he didn't sell that many records, right?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
So, I mean, I don't know that nobody knows about him. I mean, a lot of people know about him, but I just feel like, I don't know, Keith Richards, you talk about the Stones, Keith Richards, did you read his autobiography?
I made it most of the way through. I don't know that I ever finished
but he has a segment on Graham, and he said, other than John Lennon, he's like the one guy that he's ever met that just like had that like magic to him, like from like just musically and everything else. So he put him on the same level as Lennon, which that's
unbelievable.
Yeah.
I talked to, I don't know if you're familiar with Michael McDermott. He was on a few episodes ago, and he said that he met one of the guys who made the nudie suits back in the day. Mm-hmm. And he said that guy used to always tell him that he helped burn Graham's body in the desert.
Yeah. Did you ever see that terrible movie, by the way?
No, I stayed far away from it. I saw Johnny Knoxville in the lineup, and I was like, I think I can pass on this one. But. Number 9, name an artist whose output you'll consume anything they release, even if you need to be apologetic for it.
Well, Sunvolt. I'll
yes.
buy. I mean, I used to be that way with REM, but I got to a point where I was like, there's like one song on this album I think I might like, and I think also probably Jason Isbell is another person,
definitely. Okay, the 10th and final of the top 10 countdown. What is your favorite Jawn of all time?
So for this one, I'm gonna go away from music a little, but tie it to Megunticook, which is Maine, the state. So Megunticook is a lake in Maine. I've been going to Maine in the summers. My parents had a summer house in that area where Megunticook is, and we go up there, and I just always had this like tie to the state, and my wife loves it, and so like that to me is like that's just like my place. Like I just look forward to it, and again I named the album after a lake. Actually, there's a song on the EP called Norton's Pond, which is actually about the pond where my parents' house was, and actually that actually feeds into Megunticook Lake. So it's like that's my.
There's a symbolism there of how that EP fed into the album as well. I like it. I like it.
Yeah. I there is that tie. I mean, the name of the album, it was interesting. I was thinking between that and Leaving for Ohio, which is one of the songs on that's the second song of the album. And when I engaged that graphic artist to do the cover, Jimmy Everhart. I don't know if you know him.
No.
He's a local musician. He fronts a band called Cosmic Guilt.
Oh, okay.
He used to be the guitar player, I think, for Lokakani. And so I said, well, here's the two names I'm considering for the album cover. He's like, oh, Megunticook. He's like, I've been there.
No way.
So I was like, oh, okay. I was like, all right, it's karma. Let's get that. So.
Wow, you gotta take that sign. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. All right, so if these good folks want to find more out about the Miners, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, well, so we have a website, minersmusic.com, which is, has links to everything. Our social media, everything is the Miners PA.
Okay.
Because and it's ERS, not ORS. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, I think YouTube might be the Miners PA. I think the YouTube is also Miners PA as far as I can tell, but we do bump into a couple other miners out there. There wasn't one when we started the name and we searched the internet, we could find no other miners. So, and sometimes it gets confusing because sometimes like when we release something, like the distributors end up like putting it associated with the wrong band. So and you can't talk to anybody, right? So you're like sending them emails and then 6 months later it gets worked out. But for like the major ones like Spotify and Apple Music, that's, there's only our stuff that's attributed to ours. So.
After I started this podcast, a friend of mine sent me a link. It was way after. So I know I was first. I actually went and did the research, but there's a That's My Jawn podcast. And
oh, really?
And it started after this, and that made me furious. But not as mad as sitting there Thanksgiving morning watching the Macy's Day Parade, and there's a commercial for Jimmy Fallon's new TV show, That's My Jam. And I was like, no, Jimmy Fallon, no. I'm still
Well,
bitter.
is the other one with the Jawn in it? Is that Philly based?
It is a Philly guy, yeah.
Okay.
And I think he only did like 2 or 3 episodes in it. Yeah, I'm not worried about him. I checked his Facebook page out, and if he wants to talk to me, we can talk. But well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been all completely my pleasure, and I love this album, and I thank you not just for making that music, but also for coming on the show and talking to me about it.
Well, I had a great time. I'm glad you enjoyed the album, and keep doing what you're doing. And, maybe we'll see each other at a show or something sometime, since it sounds like we got a lot of the same interests musically.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Many thanks again to Keith Marlowe for joining me on the podcast today. Be sure to catch Keith and his band, The Miners, on Saturday, January 8th at the World Cafe Live for the 6th annual Living Beyond Breast Cancer benefit at 8 p.m. And you can find more about The Miners on their website at www.minersmusic.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/TheMinersPA, and on Instagram and Twitter at TheMinersPA. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. We're everywhere. Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, Stitcher, blah, blah, blah. If they have podcasts, we are there. Subscribe. And of course, if you're trying to earn yourself a super awesome John Scout merit badge for citizenship of the world, you can do so just by rating and reviewing us. Don't forget to visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/yothat'smyjawn for updates and live streams. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Yo That's My Jawn, and search Yo That's My Jawn on YouTube to find the Yo That's My Jawn YouTube channel. And then, while you're there, like and subscribe the heck out of that ish. We want to hear from you. Reach out and touch some Jawn. Well, that's all I got for you this week, and I hope you enjoyed it. Do you think it was better than That's My Jam? You can be honest. Actually, you know what? Please don't. Please don't be honest. Lie to me. Tell me I'm pretty. Tell me I'm prettier than Jimmy Fallon, please. Blue skies. Until next time, everybody.
Hey yo, displace the guilt and
Yo, That's My Jawn is a Lonely Monk production written and produced by yours truly, Nate Runkle. Theme song by Phil Tyler Music featuring Nate 3.0. Special thanks to Fox Run Brands, DX Ferris, Andrew Scott, Natalie Runkle, and the incredibly brilliant and wickedly stunning Katie Daubney. If you or anyone you know has any ideas they would like to share or any guests they would like to hear on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at yothat'smyjawn@gmail.com. Or you can leave an audio message for us and possibly hear yourself on a future episode by visiting anchor.fm/ytmj/message. Until next time, be sure to displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure and shout to the world, yo, that's my Jawn.